came out?
I guess so, sure.
How was that for you tonight?
Huh?
How was watching with the audience?
The ending was.
But I guess to start, like, before this movie happened in the 80s, you and Gloria and George had been discussing doing a Howard Duck movie for a long time, hadn't you?
Well, it wasn't that long. It was doing special effects here in LA, in the valley. We would have lunch, and we happened to have lunch one day, which was George said, "I wanted to show you something." So we went down the street, and there was a comic book store, and they had Howard the Duck comic books. And I said, "What does this mean?" And he said, "I think we should do a movie of this, you know." So,
And that was kind of right when the comic book had first come out?
I don't know. I don't know the whole.
Okay.
The comic book world is something I don't really understand.
So, at what point did the film itself come together? Do you remember, like, was it George saying, "Hey, this is happening"? Was it something you and Gloria had been, like, pitching to do, or was it a combination of all
Well,
of
we
that?
were trying to decide what to do next, and he said, "Let's do Howard the Duck." Yeah. Since we didn't have any better ideas at the moment, we said, "Okay." So, started pitching to different studios and so forth. Finally, somebody said they would do it, and that was it.
It was ended up being Universal Studios, right?
That was Universal, and the guy who was the head of Universal, Frank Price, and he was a very nice man. By the time this film was over, he'd have been fired. We got it. In movies, a lot of times, variety headlines coming on about, sticks, next sticks, things. We got a great headline, unfortunately for him, was Howard Duck cooks Price's goose, and they fired him. And we were in San Francisco at the time, but I got a call from our assistant and said, they've given our office. And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, Frank Price has moved in." And I said, "These guys are really rude." And he says, "It's worse than that." He said, "They haven't fixed the phone yet. So whenever you pick up the phone, you answer the phone, they go, 'Howard the Duck.'" So, anyway,
Yeah,
that was
kind of
the end of him. Yeah.
But before all that, it was just in the writing process with you and Gloria working on the adaptation of it. Was there any different versions than what ended up on the screen? Was there different ideas on how to work the material?
Probably. But, I had a stroke recently, and the only reason I'm saying this is my memory. My memory is very poor when it comes to a lot of this stuff. The other reason I said it is that people are usually very kind when you've had a stroke. So that we wouldn't get any nasty comments from people.
I don't think you're going to get any nasty comments tonight. I think everyone here loves this movie. And I think it's just a thing about movies find audiences, and sometimes it might not be right away, sometimes it takes a little bit, but I think Howard has found an audience. And have you kind of noticed the kind of cult following behind this movie now?
Yeah, and Marvel has brought Howard back in some of the comic books, and I guess it's in films.
I think you've appeared in an animated episode of one of the Marvel shows, and I think it's in a couple of those Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
When we met him in that first comic was in a comic book called Swamp Thing, and they had a little duck for some reason, and he said that could be Howard. He said that's Howard.
Speaking of Howard as kind of creation, Steve Gerber was the guy who created it.
Yes.
Did you work with him at all during the process?
No. Maybe we should have. I don't know.
But I do want to say something about this movie is that I think it's a very effects driven movie, and there's a lot going on and all that. And like, you know, I know if you don't remember, that's fine. But like, I feel like it's a prop. Like, there's a lot of effects stuff in it, and like, you know, your main character is a duck. Like, how did you have to? What kind of approaches did you have on like trying to bring Howard to the screen?
Well, a lot of things were very difficult that would be difficult at all today. I mean, everything you see on there, including Phil Tippett's monster, that would be very easy to do. He actually can build a little monster, dark overlord. Everything was like that. It'd be easier to do this kind of thing today. At the time, at, well, we were working with a special effects house that happened to be George's. So the best we could do is we say this really isn't working well, and they said, well, it's a CD. And so we finally figured out CBB net could be better. And I was pointing out to George, we've got like 400 CBBs here. What are we going to do? So the process, yeah, it was a little difficult, and we spent a lot of time in San Francisco.
So, and when you guys were working on the script, like, were you thinking of big kind of like action, like science fiction, like set pieces to kind of like put in? Because like, you know, Howard the comic is more of like a esoteric kind of comedy
Yeah.
thing, and this is more of an action adventure comedy.
Well, yeah, the idea was to make science fiction something with a lot of special effects.
Now, I think when we were watching the credits, there was 8 credited people that played Howard throughout the movie, but there was 2 main Howards, wasn't there, at different points?
There were 2 Howards, Ed Gale, and then there was, I had this brilliant idea, we cast forever, and George had notebooks, of course, with little people in them. He knew every little person in the world, but he, you know, I said, George, the problem is these little people are great, but they're all adults. What if we got a kid little person who wasn't an adult little person yet? So they found Jordan Prentice, who was, I think, 12 or something like that. And we had Ed Gale, but Ed was used mostly for stunt scenes, and he was bigger. So we thought Jordan was great because he was little. And he was Canadian, and he had a mother and a special social worker who made sure that it wasn't too grim, but it was pretty bad. He had to wear, it was like the man in the Iron Mask. He wore something that had gears and noises, and it was hot, and it was horrible. The saddest thing is I saw him, I was walking one day down the hall and I saw him, and he was just lying against the wall, you know, that he had, and he had a hair dryer in his mouth. Because it took too long to take all this stuff on him, so we decided to leave it on, and if you opened his gills wide enough, you could put the hairdresser in on, you know, not on heat, but on cool. So he was lying, you know, it was pathetic. And his mother was very upset. I don't think we were kind enough to Jordan Prentice, but he had a career. He went on and he worked as a little person, and he did several movies.
We were talking about the different Howards.
Yeah. The little Howard was good because the other Howard and the face was a real problem. The first day, I think it was the first shot of the movie, it went out of control, and his bill, his beak above his bill opened up, and all this stuff came out. You could see fires and all this stuff, and he was screaming, and it was, I thought we had killed him, and then the worst was at the ending, because when they're racing around on those little go-karts and the special effects are going, and Howard's actually driving one of the cars, it was Ed Gale who was in the car. So we're shooting it, and I hear his mother start screaming, and she's saying, "Oh my God, he's on fire, he's on fire." And we looked, and he was. His feathers were burning, and it was very dramatic, so people had to rush in with fire extinguishers and everything going out.
That is,
Yeah,
wow.
but he survived, and he had a career.
That's the most important thing. So this was a very challenging shoot because you're dealing with effects. You're dealing with effects that are like kind of, I don't want to say they're being made on the fly, but like it's technology that didn't exist, and you're trying to figure out how to do like these big.
Well, these things today, when he zooms off a duck world, and they actually built a chair on wires, and they had to go through all the like the female duck who was in the bathtub. It had to actually crash through everything. You wouldn't have to do any of that.
That's the magic of CGI.
Yeah.
Now, I was going to ask you about the tone of the movie. Like, was it in minded for kids and stuff? Because like there is the duck nudity and that kind of stuff.
Well, maybe we should have considered it. But it came down to, the first battle we had was the duck itself, because all of a sudden Disney started suing Universal, saying that you'd stolen Bob. So we got involved in lawsuits, and we would go up the Dark Tower at Universal, and there'd be like 20 lawyers sitting around. And in the center would be Howard the Duck and Donald. And, you know, they'd be talking about the similarities. We say, it's not similar at all. He's got a much, narrower bill, and you know, they try to come up with all. But, so finally, we won. And, there was a day that George called and said, "We've got Howard, we beat Donald."
Is that why Daffy ended up in the movie but not Donald?
That's right.
Well, I mean, the irony is now Disney owns Howard the Duck, but
That's right. They ended up with Marvel Comics.
yeah, they bought Marvel Comics.
Yeah. So it came around.
It's weird how that happened. But like, yeah, because like as a kid, because I saw this as a kid, and like, I feel like kids' movies in the 80s were different than how kids' movies are now. I think kids' movies now are very safe, where like I feel like you get unexpected surprises and things that actually get stuck in your brain or remember.
Yeah, well, kids were more sophisticated about than the movie, I think. Yeah, it was always a problem. It was a problem. It kept rearing his head. And we got invited to lunch at Universal, and we were going, and I said, "Who is this guy?" Because we were one of the executives, and they said, "Well, that's the who was the head of Universal?"
Was it Sid Sheinberger and
Even higher. Lou Wasson.
yeah, Lou Wasson.
Yeah, they said, "That's Lou Wasson, his best friend. You're gonna have lunch with him today." I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because you have to talk about the airplane." And I said, "Okay." I had no idea. So we sat down, and his old buddy, his job was to make sure that we met airline specifications for movies on board. So there were a lot of little tweaks we had to do so they could show the movie on
airplane.
Yeah.
The duck nudity would fly.
No.
We were literally.
They asked them like the breasts. You have to have
Now, one thing I wanted to ask about, because we were talking a little bit before we got on stage, this was a UK print, and there's some weird UK censorship in this print.
Yeah, I forgot. One thing was really missing. One thing was really missing was we had this great little harmonica thing where she was so depressed she was walking in the rain. It was because he happened to be in the mix when we were doing the music, so he said he would do a harmonica. So it's really a lovely piece, but it didn't make it in one night.
I think the big thing was the duck condom.
The what?
The duck condom was cut out of this print.
That's right. I knew there was something missing.
And
And right in the beginning, when she's going through his wallet, she finds a rubber, and she goes all.
it's weird that UK had a problem with like a duck practicing safe sex. UK's weird. I don't know. But I do want to talk about, you do have a wonderful cast. I want to talk about Leah Thompson and Tim
Mia
Robbins.
was great. And,
Woo!
Mia was really good.
She just kind of like goes all in and like is just like, cause she sang her parts. Didn't
Yeah, yeah. Tom Dolby put the girl group together, and it was really interesting. I mean, he did a good job.
I think like those songs still hold up and are pretty much really fun.
Yeah.
Like, you know, John Barry did the rest of the score, right?
The rest of most of the score, the ultralight was we had to bring in somebody else because he had something that sounded like sort of like a French. And an action.
Gotcha.
It was very dark. We found somebody else to do something else.
Now, this was Tim Robbins' first his first movie, right? Or something close to it.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you remember how you found him for this?
Just in readings and so forth. And actors, you know,
Just auditioning?
auditioning for, yeah.
Now, I know it's been a while for this movie, it's been a while since you've seen it with the audience. Like, what do you think it's about? Like, when did you kind of notice there was a audience building around this movie? Because I know it came out and, like, you know, critically, like, it kind of got beat up at the time, but, like, as we were saying, the audience finds the movie, or the audience for the movie finds it. When did you kind of notice people were, like, very, like, hey, I really like this movie?
Yeah, usually it was like taxi cab drivers. And I think they liked it before anyone else. That was before Uber and so forth.
So taxi drivers are the ones that spread the gospel power of the duck.
But, and then they started, which I thought was a good sign, they started stealing things. They broke into our storage, which was here in the valley, and they stole Howard's guitar, which I was really depressed about, because it was a beautiful guitar, and George at the time was dating, what's her name, the singer? Linda Ronstadt. Thank you. He was dating Linda Ronstadt, and her friend was a guitar maker. He made us this beautiful guitar. And so one day when I went into storage, and because my daughter sells a lot of Howard the Duck's crap that I had left over. So I went in, and I could tell it had broken in, and the guitar was missing. It was a big deal. So I realized people, you know, were willing to steal things for this movie.
So once the theft became part of it, then you realized there wasn't.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, taxi drivers do have a car and have a getaway. You want to do some audience questions?
Sure.
All right. Anyone have any questions? All the way back there.
So sometimes directors will make the same picture twice, I think the Peacock and the Mill. So if you had a chance to do this again, considering your first time reaction,
No. Once was enough.
All right. Anyone else? See a hand right up front there.
I know originally Robin Williams was slated to be the voice of Howard. Do you have any recollection of that?
Yeah, he wasn't really slated to do it. Everybody, after a while, young male actors thought it was fun to fly up and, to go to Lucasfilm and to try out for it. And Robin, since he lived in San Francisco, we put it off and he finally came in. But he knew and we knew immediately it was impossible because the great thing about Robin Williams was how fast he talked, and he was a genius. And in this, we had already shot the duck, so he could only say what the duck was saying, and it was really impossible, which he realized right away. So we ended up my late wife Gloria and Walter Murch, searched forever to get the right Howard. They finally came up with this young guy who was a Broadway. He was from Broadway, and but he could do this really nice accent. So we hired him.
Was it Chip? Chip?
Chip Zion. Yeah, he had done Sonny the Barber George or something, some Sondheim thing. It didn't seem like the right, but he did a really good job.
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
Especially when like you're kind of having to do like, you're doing basically kind of MOS for like Howard and like having to add in because like was anyone that was in the suit trying to mouth the lines they were supposed to be saying as they were going?
Yes. Well, we had a long table, and they were called puppeteers, and a lot of them had started in puppetry and so forth. And one would do the eyes, and one would do the mouth, and they each had this specific part of his anatomy that they were in charge of. And it was very serious. So they watched and had to know. But the guy who did the mouth was recording, so we had that.
I'll say a scratch track for that.
Yeah. And that's what, meant it was locked in. You couldn't do anything else unless we wanted to reshoot the scene. We reshot a lot of scenes because of special effects and so all the CVDs that could be better started piling up. It was insane. But fortunately, George owned the special effects company, so it wasn't so bad.
All right. Let's see. Right there.
Yeah. Well, I liked his stuff, and I think his first album was called something about science, Weird Science, or something like that. Yeah. What was it called? Yeah, Blinded Me with Science, and I just happened to think, well, this is a great sound. So, and he turned out to be wonderful, and he worked with girls all the time. I mean, he really put that together, and that part was fun.
In the back there.
What was the idea of putting the infamous duck boobs at the beginning?
The duck boobs?
Yeah.
I don't know. We were just having fun, and the guy who was doing the ducking, and he said, "She's in a bathtub. Do you want her to have breasts?" I said, "Sure." And so, yeah, they had. Was that what that was there? Wasn't it?
It was there. Yeah. It duck boobs fine. Duck condom no go.
The
Right
kind
there.
So you talked about the Could Be Better, the CDs.
Yeah.
To you, watching it today, what's your biggest CDB, your most momentous CDB? Like, oh my God, I wish I could have done that better. But what's your thing?
Well, I really believe it went too long. It was too much. Everybody was having such a great time. And, that the Dark Overlord was only like this big, and he was very small, and Phil Tippett is a wonderful, ugly creature. But, what was the question?
Wait, what's the most lamented CBD?
Oh, I don't know, everything, eventually, yeah, we probably still have some CBDs, but, I don't know, you can't tell. Some of them could have been better, if you care.
All right, I think we'll do one more, gentleman right there.
How involved was Lucas in the production? Was he there on set, or was he mostly
No, he wasn't. He was doing what he loved more than anything, which is editing. So he could sit with the editor, you know, and all day, and he got to edit everything. So, I mean, he was quite happy doing that, you know. But, that was it.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming out today. And if you come back to the Side Eagle, I'd love to have you back